All right. Nithyanandam, everyone. This is Prasiddha, and I am here with Ishaa. Today, we're going to be kind of just diving deep with Ishaa and talking about Hinduism and her awesome organization that she founded, Shanti Sisterhood. Thank you so much for joining me, Ishaa. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Namaste, everyone. Thank you for having me, Prasiddha.
Yes, of course. So Isha is currently in university studying, and she is also the founder of Shanti Sisterhood. So maybe you could first start off by telling us a little bit about the inspiration behind Shanti Sisterhood and what it all is for somebody who hasn't heard of it.
Yeah, of course. So, just to give a little bit of background, I have grown up Hindu, and in my family, my mom is the one who's more spiritual. She's not super religious in the sense that she doesn't do a lot of the pujas and things like that at home, just because growing up in the US, it's pretty hard to really be into Hinduism in the way that, like, for example, Christians are able to be
Mm.
going to church and having that community. So she's become kind of isolated from the actual practices, but she's always been very spiritual and she prays and she reads the Bhagavad Gita. And so I've grown up on that. And so I think that's kind of where my faith has always been there, but it wasn't something I was super connected to until high school when I was extremely stressed and I was going through a lot of, existential sort of angst, like a typical teenager kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, that got me thinking there has to be something more out there. There has to be something greater than going to school every day and getting a B and getting an A and all of this stuff that's this material world. And that was when I realized that, I've had the answers the whole time and it's just within my own faith that I grew up in. And so I started looking into it more. I started, connecting with my mother and with my grandmother, who's like she was a super devout Hindu and she
Uh,
wore her sari and her big red bindi every day. And so that's kind of how I realized that I want to be a practicing Hindu and this is basically one of the most important parts of my identity. And so going into university, I saw that there are a lot of Indian students on my campus, which is awesome. And most of these people are Hindu in the sense that they were brought up in Hindu families, but nearly none are connected to the faith or believe in it at all,
right.
which it's a personal choice. Like, I think that's if somebody doesn't want to follow or connect with Hinduism, it's completely up to them. But that did leave me feeling like there isn't a community where I can connect with people who have similar beliefs and share similar values and Hindu faith. And
Mm.
so I actually took inspiration from some groups that I saw online for Muslim women and for Christian women. And I saw these groups and I thought they were amazing and how these women were able to connect with each other based on their shared values and their faiths. And I started looking into if there was a similar group for Hindus, and there really wasn't. And so I said, if there isn't a seat at the table, then I'm going to pull up a chair. So I said, you know what, I'm just going to do this. And just the name Shanti Sisterhood kind of resonated with me. So I had met a couple of Hindus on Instagram from all over the US who were also in universities across the United States. And so I made a group chat with about 9 of us. And I was like, do you guys want to do this? And they were like, yes, that's awesome. So we created an Instagram, we started making posts, we started doing research, and it grew really fast. And I'm really thankful for the online community I've been able to create. So yeah.
Oh, I love that. It makes me so happy. And it's so true. It's beautiful that you kind of took that initiative and inspiration to create what you wanted to exist, right? Because it wasn't there. And it is so interesting to observe. Of course, like although I was not raised Hindu,
Mhm.
being Hindu for the last 6 years plus, I have seen just in that time how much exactly what you're saying is true. There's just a lot of a lack of resources in the same way for Hindus in the United States. Lack of connections, lack of places of gathering and interfaith stuff and community, like in a lot of ways that we see abundantly within other communities, particularly of course like Christianity, because it's such a predominant aspect of American culture, so to speak. But it's so cool. So what is your kind of vision for Shanti Sisterhood and where you would like to kind of start taking it?
Yeah, so what I would like Shanti Sisterhood to be somewhere in the far out future is to be more of like a physical community as well. So having different like chapters in different cities, having, in-person events where people can get together and gather and sing bhajans or, discuss events in the Hindu world and things like that. Whereas right now it's been pretty much solely online because of COVID and because we have people from all over the world who interact with the page. Like there's people from like different countries in Asia and in the US and, European countries and Australia. And while that's great, I like eventually want it to be something with different chapters where people can meet up and have a physical community as well. Because I think it's very important. COVID has shown us how important.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. And I think that's definitely such a real tangible possibility, for where it's going.
Yeah,
and
I hope so.
If you guys haven't yet checked out the page, please do so. It's such an awesome resource. I absolutely love your guys' posts. They're so well done, so beautiful. And the page is such a great resource for people, whether they're already a Hindu or like interested in learning about Hinduism. It's such a great plug to gather and to get that knowledge and also to interact, because of course within the page, right, I know your goal is like that community. So you meet a lot of people through that page, through, shared interaction / of course, like direct interaction for whoever wants to. So it's an exciting thing. And you also had a meeting, right? Or multiple meetings of online, right? Since the start.
Yeah. So we've had, I think about either 2 or 3 like Zoom meetings, and they've all been super fun. In one of them, we just talked about like our own personal connections to Hinduism, like our own stories, and then like different issues that Hindus face. And then in one of them, we actually had a guest speaker. Her name is Sonali, and she's an Australian Hindu, Kashmiri Hindu influencer, and she's amazing. So she came and spoke to us about her own journey and how she comes from one of the most persecuted communities in the world, which is Kashmiri Hindus. And she talked about, the gaslighting she's had to face and the Hinduphobia and all of these things, and how she keeps her sanity and her mental health among a world that kind of invalidates Hindus like her. And that was such a powerful, incredible session we had with her.
Wow. I love that. That's super cool. She's awesome. I've actually connected with her too online. Because of the multiple communities, we've been connected through too. She's such a powerful woman. She's awesome. And I think that's actually such a cool, example of how much this concept can be so enriching for people, because to have like voices highlighted, especially from people from around the world, Hindus from around the world who have had such unique experiences and real life, direct stories of either, whether it's in the positive or the negative of, of their experience as Hindus and facing oppression, Hinduphobia, or even persecution from different places and different pockets, of where they might exist, is really important, because you don't hear or see like Hindu voices really at all being highlighted in any way in the media or journalism. So it's a tricky one to break the ice with, because people just are so ignorant about it, especially in the United States. And going off that topic, I would love to hear your experience, thoughts, opinions on Hinduism in the United States, and / your maybe thoughts on the Hinduphobia here, or the lack of education and resources, and what you've kind of faced in your direct experience and of course in your community.
Right. Yeah. So I think Hinduism in the United States, or the Hindu community as a whole, is in a very unique and unfortunate position, really, because we're in a position where we're demonized by both the left and the right wing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that is so crazy. And it's like most of the time, in any, or in the US specifically, a community will be either have support on the left or on the right. Yeah. Like it's typically how it works, or even if it's not tangible, real support, at least in the narrative, it will be, at least someone will be pretending to care. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's how it works. But for Hindus, it's like the right of US politics considers us to be, kind of primitive, like backward, like the same way that they treat other people of color and other non-Christian communities. And then on the left, we're all seen as RSS agents, and we're all seen as working for a foreign government and fascist, which could not be further from the truth.
Huh.
I mean, we have Hindus like you who are not even Indian or South Asian, right? And what do you have to do with the BJP and whatever political entities? But
Right.
there will still be some kind of trying to tie Hindus to these different groups. And I've seen this all over the internet by, prominent activists, journalists, and organizations. It's not even just trolls. And I think a great example of this is the Hindu American Foundation, which I consider that to be pretty much one of the only like Hindu representation that we have in the public policy government world. Mm-hmm. And they're a bipartisan sort of effort. They have no monetary connections to India, no funding from any other countries. And there's been a whole campaign to slander them as working for different governments and working for, violent organizations or whatever it is.
Right.
And, the co-founder of Hindu American Foundation, Suhag Shukla, she's one of my biggest inspirations. She's incredible. She grew up in the US, and, she's even said that she personally identifies as a Democrat. And, even with that, people are still accusing her of being a right-wing crazy person, Right. And I think it's amazing how she handles all the trolls on Twitter, and she reinstates like, no, this is what Hindu American is about. We have nothing to do with other, governments and whatnot. And we're all about empowering the Hindu American community. And I think that's what we need more of.
Yeah, so well said. It's really interesting to see that like intersection happen between this really odd language or weaponization, of language being used against Hindus in particular, with like correlating such a deep like political angle on anything and everything that has to do with simple spirituality, faith, cultural or tradition or religion, like, and that inability of people for some reason to separate those, and to project so much onto so many different Hindus from many diverse different upbringings. I mean, needless to say, even Hindu Americans who are Indian, they're American, they were raised here. So it's like, why is there even like that angle being, it's just, I think it comes from a lot of ignorance and also a lot of, deep-seated bigotry and like colonial viewpoints on Hinduism in general, and like how many misunderstandings there are. Actually, this brings me to another thing too, right? So it was really interesting growing up. So I grew up in California, and in my school system, I've seen what I've seen. I'm sure everyone has their unique experience, even within the United States. But I remember like even being in California as a more liberal state overall, right? It's supposed to be a more progressive area of the United States. And I remember learning about Hinduism maybe once ever, in school, in all 13 years of mandatory education before our university. And even the like few sentences that they shared on Hinduism were completely inaccurate. And it's these mandatory state textbooks that are passed and created, of course, by predominantly white Christian men, generally speaking, who are putting these books together without even the input of an actual Hindu, which is crazy to me, because that would never happen for a Christian explanation. They would never get away with that. If somebody were to write like Jesus, it was a woman and actually taught this, they'd be like blasphemy, and they'd like sue them to the death, right? Whereas I remember Shiva was introduced to me as a goddess. I was like, wait, that's literally not even the right gender. Not that it really matters, he's beyond gender, but still, like just so many little
like there's no research done.
Right. And I mean, and most of the time I think it's not even touched on at all. So how could we ever expect for there to be a proper dialogue happening here, right? Like, what was your experience in primary school, high school, and university now? Like, have you had any like, group education on Hinduism at all, or that you've seen?
Well, so the earliest that I learned about Hinduism at school was in high school when I took a world history class.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I'm sure you've heard. It's the phenomenon of caste, cow, and curry. And
Yes.
so the three C's, and those are the only things that, the American and just the Western, or sometimes even the Indian school system will teach you about Hinduism. And, I'm sure you've heard of, there was a demonstration, I think it was in California, about textbooks.
Yeah.
Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
I think it was in California, but it was where Hindu American students and parents wanted there to be a more authentic and less of a biased view of Hinduism taught in schools. And I remember, because as of now, or at least when I was in high school, the only thing they taught us is Hinduism is the reason there's a rigid birth-based hierarchy, and the light-skinned people are at the top and the dark-skinned people are at the bottom, and it's it's imperatively a part of Hinduism, and it cannot be separated, and that is what Hinduism teaches. And it's like, why is that the way we're framing a religion? Like, when you're learning about a religion, of course you should learn about the ways that it's been misused and the ways that people have exploited it, without a doubt. But to frame a religion as being inherently evil and having no positive sides and having no, especially a religion that's 5,000 years old, how could it not have been altered and, used for some kind of oppression, which is not an excuse, but we should be able to look at it from a rather well-rounded perspective.
Exactly.
And yeah, and I remember activists were saying, oh, this is an attempt to whitewash the caste system, and this is an attempt to whitewash history, when the same activists have been actively whitewashing history themselves by not telling the truth about Hindu history, including stuff like the impacts of British colonialism, the genocides perpetrated by Mughals, all of these different things, and that's seen as okay to certain people. Whereas, talking about the positives of Hinduism is not seen as okay at all. And that just makes you think, why are people so adamant? Why are people so, they're pushing this idea that Hinduism is regressive and evil? And they don't do the same for other organized religions. And so, like Audrey Truschke at Rutgers, for example, that's a prime example. Why are leftist organizations backing up a white woman who's, she's not responsible for what her father-in-law is doing, but her father-in-law is actually a Christian missionary who converts people, which I'm not saying she's responsible for that, but just looking at it from a wider angle, it's a white woman who has clear white privilege sitting here and telling Hindus that we are primitive and backward and regressive and evil. And leftist organizations are supporting her. And so that really makes you think, why is this happening?
Yep. And even just to, in my opinion, the very basic level of respect for any culture, religion, or tradition, or ethnic group in general would be to, one, allow them to speak for themselves and highlight their voices, but two, at the very least, you should at least be taught by somebody who follows that tradition. And so it's like my friend who is in university took a class, she was telling me, and when they were learning about Christian mysticism and just the Christian tradition in general, a priest came in to talk to them. Great, that's so cool, because you're going to get the authentic perspective of a person who follows that, who follows that tradition and can give the proper context, who can explain it, the reasons behind why they see it as beautiful, right? It doesn't mean you're going to follow, you can follow whatever you want, but it's wonderful to see that lens. In the same way, it's really not okay to be seeing such one-sided approaches to Hinduism, first of all, but also from somebody who clearly isn't coming from a respectful or really understanding place at all, right? And trying to represent Hindu stories and Hindu, spiritual tenets as something that they're not is so harmful, right? And we just see so much of this happening. And I think it was really eye-opening for me the last few years, actively looking for this kind of information and knowledge. And I don't, if I wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have had any clue how big this problem really is. So many people don't understand the level that Hinduphobia really is happening at such a deep level in the education systems and in media representation, both, I would say, as like two big areas it's happening, right? And it's just it's really sad. It's like I heard it called the danger of a single story.
Mm-hmm.
I learned about this in when I did a gap year program, and they educated us before we went off to different countries, and they are like, look, like you need to be really self-aware to not fall into this trap of the danger of a single story. And they use the example of Africa, right? How Africa has been represented as one, Africa, even though it's a continent.
Right. Yes.
And two, that like this single story that has been told about Africa is like safari, lions, tribal people, and that's it. Like, even though, does that exist there? But are there 1,000 other things also existing there? But we've only heard the one story. So it conjures this one view and this one image of what it is, right? And it's so dangerous. It's so dangerous to having empathy and to having understanding and respect for a whole nother culture, right? And it's really sad. But I think because of people like you and because of organizations and communities forming that are taking their time to educate and taking their voices out there on social media, and utilizing that, it's going to really hopefully help that progression and help people to just be more and more aware of like really having that understanding and having that compassion and ability to communicate with people that they might not understand or traditions that they might not know about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask too, what was it like being in, so you said in high school, you kind of started to look back to your roots into Hinduism. Could you share a little bit more about what tradition you were raised in and or are practicing now, and what kind of sparked that re-inspiration in you to reconnect with it?
So growing up, it was not very, like I said before, it wasn't very like ritual intensive or like physical practice intensive. It was just more of reading texts. Like the Bhagavad Gita was the main one that my mom would read to me when I was a kid. And then I started reading, and she has like a little pocket Gita that she's had and a yellow prayer shawl kind of thing that she's had since she was in college studying. And you can just see like all the wear and tear on the Gita, that she's used it so many times for like over 20-25 years. And so I'd always seen how much that meant to her. And so where I started was the Bhagavad Gita, which I already knew, but then I started reading it and watching videos about it and looking into it more. And so growing up, the main form of God that we focused on at my house was always Lord Krishna. It was probably the most basic or the simplest path that most people start with. And so I'm still a huge devotee of Lord Krishna. And now I've also been looking into and learning more about Shakti, which Shaktism is not super prevalent where my parents are from, either of them, but they both are interested in it, and they've like taught me a little bit about it. And so I started looking more into Shakti and into Tantra and some of these movements and these schools of Hinduism, and I just love it. And I feel personally like you don't have to follow just one particular path in Hinduism, because a fire burns in many ways. It's a quote from the Vedas, where you don't have to follow just one straight path. There's different ways that things can manifest, and that's kind of what I've been doing.
Right. I love that. That's so well said. Actually, that was one of the things I really fell in love with within Hinduism, is that there is so much diversity of thought and belief and connection to the divine, and all of it is seen as beautiful. All of it is accepted, and none of it is there's not that limitation of like, you have to pick one, or no, you can only do this, you can only do it this way, right? There's literally like so much contradiction even within unique paths, and that's so cool, because it's like it creates this constant seeking, right? That's the point. It's not about like this tell us black and white what's right, what's wrong, because that's a very Abrahamic framework on religion, right? And I think that's where people get a little confused, like, what do you mean? So what do Hindus believe in? Like, I can't really tell you, because because there isn't only one methodology, right? There's so many paths that lead to the same place. And yeah, it's such a liberating tradition in that sense. So it's really cool that you're exploring that. I definitely resonate. I kind of started in Shaivism, and I still connect as a Shaivite mainly, but I also, in my heart, I'm like in a lot of other things as well, especially with the goddess, and with even with like Vaishnavism in general. I'm like very connected to Vishnu in that way too. So it's so beautiful. Now with your family, especially I guess your grandma, you said she would always wear like sari and bindi and all of that. And now I know a lot of times you also wear bindi a lot. How has that been for you, like owning that identity and how has it felt? What kind of experience have you had in the United States doing that?
So I don't wear a bindi every day. I just try and wear it, multiple times a week, I would say.
Cool.
And I just wear it sort of when I feel like it.
Yeah.
And I started doing that not too long ago. It probably has been less than a year since I started just wearing a bindi on occasions other than Diwali, like just on a regular day. And I have not had any negative experiences with it so far, which is great. I do live in a more, culturally aware, like diverse area. So that's probably a perk. But I've noticed it makes me feel more empowered and just aware. And I feel like I'm being proud and I'm showing my Hindu identity, and it's not something that I have to hide or anything like that. And it also reminds me sort of to look inwards, because the spot where we put our bindi is like a portal to our greater selves. And so it's just that's I think a big part of Hinduism is having physical, like material reminders of how to transcend the material world, which kind of seems contradictory, but like you said, seem contradictory in Hinduism, but I think it's very empowering to own your faith and to go out and not only remind others of who you are, but remind yourself of who you are.
Wow, that was so well said. I love that. Super beautiful and so true, right? It's like the point of a lot of these practices is breaking the mind. It's going beyond the mind. So like you said, sometimes it seems like there's this paradox, but that's the point. Like it's supposed to take us beyond. It's supposed to take us beyond. And my guru always says, like, when we're in the physical, right, we still cognize ourselves as the body, even though we know from a spiritual lens, most Hindus know their true self is existing beyond the body and mind. But right, if we come down to the ground reality, most of the time we still relate as the body. And so until we're done with that, or like we're done relating like that, having things in the physical to connect with help a lot. That's the reason like deities are so helpful to connect with, more images or bindi or anything, right? Because it's bringing our awareness back to what that representation of that really is, that energy really is, right? So interesting. And I had one more question too. What would you want to share or, say or give advice to people who are interested in Hinduism and maybe you want to start learning more or kind of know how to approach it or be an advocate for Hindus? Where can they start?
Well, I think one of the key things in at least the way that I practice and believe Hinduism is just, Advaita Vedanta, so the principle of oneness. And I think oneness can apply to basically everything in the world and beyond the world. Like how many times do you meet somebody and think that they're all good or all bad? That doesn't really happen, or 50% good and 50% bad, like people are whole selves, and there can be good and there can be bad, but essentially it's all the same. And that's a very difficult thing to grasp, and I'm still trying to grasp it. I don't think anyone, unless you've been meditating for years and decades in a spot, it's very difficult to fully come to terms with that oneness and the idea that things can appear different, but really everything is just energy. And so I think that's a principle that you need to look into, even if you're not a Hindu or interested or believe in it. It's just something so interesting to learn about. And I, of course, would say follow Shanti Sisterhood. It's open to anybody who, even if you are not a Hindu or don't want, which the thing about Hinduism is you don't need to convert, in the sense that you don't need to go through, which you can go through. There are ceremonies you can go through to be initiated into different sects, but you don't have to. You can just practice certain things, and if you feel that you're a Hindu, you're a Hindu, you know.
Mhm.
And so I would say follow Shanti Sisterhood. We try and spread awareness on different practices and sects while also talking about Hinduphobia and issues facing the Hindu community. So I would say just keep seeking. I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned from my own journey with Hinduism is I'm never going to be perfect. I'm never going to be done. You know, I'm always going to be looking for the truth no matter what. I mean, you could be 95 years old and you still don't know it all because
Mhm.
what you need to know is beyond this world. And so I think that's kind of all over the place, but that's the biggest thing that I
Yeah,
would.
I love it. That's no, it is. It's such a like great foundation to start. Like you said, the seeking process, that is what that Sanatana Dharma is all about, is the
Yeah.
seeking inside of us all and being guided by that, right? Which is a lot of times where that controversy comes into like,
Mhm.
it's not really a religion in the sense that in the English definition of that word, because it's about really the seeking impulse more than anything, than any moral standpoint or one way of doing things, because there is no one way. It's all about that drive to connect, to ask ourselves the fundamental questions, to ask, to seek those answers, and to go really deep within, right? So yeah, is there any last things you wanted to add before we wrap up the session today?
Well, just that I'm really thankful for you and for all of the great, amazing Hindu activists and, you know, spiritual leaders I've met online. I think the internet, although it has all of its pitfalls, you know, it's been a great way to connect with people. So just follow Shanti Sisterhood, engage with us, ask us questions. We're more than happy to answer. And thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for being with us, Isha. I'm so, excited to get this out there and to get more people on the amazing page of Shanti Sisterhood. Thank
Yay.
you, and we will see you guys on the next video.
Bye.